as far as the economy, et cetera, she's just kind of out of her league because she's dealing with a guy who's actually thinking about some really innovative things. I'm just trying to pull up some sound that we have of him. He was at the New York Economic Club this week and had kind of, in my estimation, some pretty innovative ideas. And I credit him, with that, right? Because, hey, we could use a little innovation when it comes to our government. One of the things that he talked about was actually the creation of a sovereign wealth fund by way of tariffs. So everybody's like, oh no, we can't have tariffs because tariffs are inflationary. The thinking being that, if you're importing goods or widgets from China and suddenly the government slaps on a tariff, that you're not going to buy as many, or you may still buy those widgets, but it's going to be painful to you and your family in that it would cost more money because those costs do get passed on. And he's like, no, we did this before. I had the most tariffs of anyone. Did you see inflation? No, you get inflation now. Here, let's watch the sound and you react.
Smart tariffs will not create inflation. They will combat inflation. I had almost no inflation, and I had the highest tariffs that anyone's seen, and they were going a lot higher. Foreign nations will pay us hundreds of billions of dollars, reducing the deficit and driving inflation down. It'll largely reduce our deficit. In my first term, we imposed historic tariffs with no effect on consumer prices or inflation. The anti-tariff people, many of them, I believe, honestly work for these other countries in some form, get tremendous amounts of lobbying money and other money because it doesn't make sense what they're saying. But we had no inflation and we had protection, and I saved so many industries. I saved the steel industry. But Biden and Harris are letting it go. They're letting it go. It's so easy.
Okay, so he's making some interesting points there. Actually, I would say, interestingly enough, Biden and Harris and Trump are all in agreement on that steel deal that we probably actually want to have happen because it would mean more investment in U.S. steel. But that's neither here right now. Neither here nor there right now. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on. And you have a background in economics and obviously a background in investing, et cetera, et cetera. So look at what he's proposing. Do you think that that's something investors would ever be interested in? I mean, we do have treasury bonds, right? How would a sovereign wealth fund be different? We run massive deficits. He's talking about the creation of this whole new vehicle.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. I mean, he's always, one thing, about Trump is that he's always kind of generating kind of original ideas and approaching things out of the box with, sort of an entrepreneur's spirit and trying to think of solutions to our problems. And, I think, like him or hate him or whatever, you got to acknowledge that he has sort of this creative mind, and he's thinking of, new ways to approach things. And, it's like, let's think about it. Like what, maybe we do create a specific investment vehicle that can address the infrastructure challenges of the United States, and we fund it, with specific mechanisms. What do we do now, basically, in terms of our infrastructure funding? We have this, highway trust fund. It's funded by gas taxes. These gas taxes have actually not really moved in absolute terms in decades because it's politically so difficult to raise the gas tax. And that's like the key reason why we have this underfunded infrastructure. So if we can develop an alternative system that, has a different funding mechanism that perhaps takes advantage of private capital, like they do all around the world to develop and fund airports and roads and ports, it could be very...
I've seen it at work, for example, in Chile. I mean, Chile is in kind of a different spot right now, but they have beautiful roads you see in Europe, right? Beautiful highways, beautiful roads, some really nice airports. I think you told me all about the Frankfurt airport. In other words, these are privatized entities in partnership with, not that we want to be Europe, right? But they are perhaps in some ways taking advantage of some more innovative approaches to dealing with infrastructure so that you get some capitalism in there, right? Like somebody's going to make a profit. Otherwise, nobody really cares.
Yeah, no, it's actually, we kind of knock Europe every now and then, but, in many ways they embrace, when it comes to infrastructure, I think they're more capitalistic in their approach than we are, where all of our infrastructure is really kind of completely publicly controlled and financed. They've got toll roads that are privatized. They've got, as I mentioned, airports. And so what happens is like the government will own maybe like a majority stake in the public entity, but it trades as a stock and it's privately managed, and there's global shareholders, and they borrow money from, the private sector, and they fund themselves through a lot, like at the airports, through like retail operations and through, passenger fees and air handling fees. And they actually tend to be run very efficiently because they're basically private sector companies that are owned in part by,
I mean, think of how
government.
exciting that would be for investors, just for a second, right? Like, this is kind of a very new sort of product. Look, he had a lot of success with those opportunity zones. Remember, in some communities that have been really challenged, he's like, hey, let's create an opportunity zone and really try and encourage capital to go to work here. So it's good for investors. It's good for the community. We're getting a lot of tune in from folks. John saying that he's all set to roll over his IRA into one of our portfolios. What I would remind you of, John, is that we don't actually manage any money. Rob and I have a view, and look, investing is risky. Go read the disclaimer, right? So you just, you need to understand your own tolerance for risk, et cetera. All that in mind, I would say that, you look at, for example, we just closed out the last 3 months, and this is the income builder portfolio with a median stock return of, let's see, what we're at, roughly 15% versus the S&P at 6%. So my thought for people is, and part of the reason we started this company is so that you can start taking investing really into your own hands. And if Rob and I can help you in any way, we have these model portfolios set up where these are the stocks and the companies that we are big believers in for the future. And so there's 3 opportunities: American resilience, you have the income builder, you have inflation, the inflation protection portfolio. You can get all of them if you're part of our founders club. And then you are then, doing that investing. And I just think it's so critical that people keep that front and center on the horizon.